when those same individuals could be investing at 5.4%.
Madam Secretary.
No, I'm sorry, I would like to.
Madam Secretary, that's just no offense. That's double talk.
It isn't
Here's
double
my
talk because
maybe
it
it's
is
my fault.
expected that
Maybe it's my fault.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got an intense Senate hearing moment for you. Senator John Kennedy put Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on the hot seat over government borrowing, and let me tell you, it got heated. If you care about how your tax dollars are being spent, you need to see this. Let's break it all down. But first, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss these crucial political moments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, always good to see you.
Likewise.
Right now, in our current fiscal year, by our, I mean the federal government, we're running looks like about a $1.1 trillion deficit. Is that correct?
About 1.6, I believe.
1.6 trillion. I'm sorry. It's even worse than I thought. And that, of course, means that we're spending $1.6 trillion more than we're taking in revenues. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And we're filling the hole by borrowing money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, if you personally were borrowing money, would you rather pay 5.4% interest or 4.4% interest?
The less the better.
Ma'am?
The less the better.
Okay. Then why aren't you doing that with federal borrowing?
Well, in federal borrowing, our objective is to issue at least cost over time and not to try to time the market.
Yeah, but you are timing the market. You issued a press release back in November that you were going to try to time the market. I mean, right now, you can issue 3-month treasuries. These are yesterday's yields at roughly 5.4%.
Yes.
But you could issue a 10-year treasury note for 4.4% and save. Let me just finish and save the taxpayer a lot of money. And then last November, you issued a press release. You said, we're going to start borrowing more short-term debt than we normally would. At the beginning of 2023, our short-term debt was about 15%. And last November, you said, we're going to increase that. And now it's about 22, 23%.
Correct.
You're costing the taxpayers billions. Why are you doing that?
So, Senator, you say it costs 5.4%. That's what it costs this year.
No, that's what it cost yesterday.
Yes, but when you issue 10-year bonds, you're locking in the 10-year rate over 10 years. And that 10-year rate, the reason that holders of 10-year Treasury bonds are willing to accept a 4.4% yield is because when those same individuals could be investing at 5.4%.
Madam Secretary.
No, I'm sorry, I would like to.
Madam Secretary, that's just no offense. That's double talk.
It isn't double talk because
maybe
it
it's
is
my fault.
expected
Maybe
that
it's my fault.
No.
Today you can borrow for 3 months at 5.4%, but instead you're choosing. Strike that. Today you can borrow for 10 years at 4.4%. Instead, you're choosing to borrow at 5.4%.
Market participants believe that.
That makes no sense.
Market participants believe that short-term interest rates will come down, and they will come down to a level substantially
So you are
below
trying to time
the
the
current 10-year rate.
You are trying to time the market.
And so, no, it isn't a question of timing the market. It's we issue across the curve in a regular and predictable way.
So here's the deal. Right now, the US is running a $1.6 trillion deficit this fiscal year. That means we're spending way more than we're taking in. And how do we cover that shortfall? We borrow money. Now, borrowing money isn't necessarily bad, it's how we do it that matters. And that's exactly what Kennedy was grilling Yellen about. Would you rather borrow money at 5.4% interest or 4.4%? Seems like an easy choice, right? Pay the lower rate. But here's where things get interesting. Instead of locking in lower long-term rates, the Treasury has been issuing more short-term debt at higher rates. Kennedy wasn't having it. He pressed Yellen saying, "You're paying 5% to borrow money when you could pay 4%. Why?" Yellen responded with economic reasoning, saying it's all part of a balanced approach. But Kennedy wasn't buying it, calling it a bad deal for taxpayers. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.
And the reason that paying...
You announced last November, I can show you the press release, where you said that we have decided to start issuing an inordinately large amount of short-term debt, didn't you?
We did make an announcement
And
about
because of the inverted yield curve, that means that you're going to pay more in interest on short-term debt than, say, 10-year debt.
only for a short time.
Now, that's a fact, okay? You can go check the numbers of Treasuries yesterday. That is, first, that costs taxpayers a lot more money in interest. And number two, you're working at cross purposes with the Federal Reserve, because what you're doing is stimulating the market. You're pumping money into the economy. And Jay Powell's over here beavering away, trying to reduce inflation. And you're beavering away, trying to increase it by paying
that we're doing
an interest rate that is 100 basis points higher than you would have to pay. And the only reason I can figure that y'all are doing that is to try to give the economy a sugar high 5 months before an election. Why else would anybody want to borrow at 5% when you can borrow at 4%?
Now here's where Kennedy really turned up the heat. Back in November, Treasury announced a shift, increasing short-term debt borrowing. This means they're betting that interest rates will drop soon. But Kennedy fired back, saying this is just an attempt to juice the economy before an election. That's a serious accusation. Is the government making smart financial decisions or playing politics? Drop your thoughts below.
Well, there is a good reason that investors are willing to accept just over 4% on a 10-year Treasury bond when they can earn 5.4% on a one-year Treasury bill.
I'm not worried about the investor.
Well,
I'm not worried about the investor. I'm worried about the taxpayer.
It's the same logic.
And let me ask you again, because I'm going to run out of time. And look, you're smarter than me. I know that. But I can grasp this concept. You're borrowing at 5% when you could borrow at 4% to deficit spend.
If I borrow it,
it makes absolutely no sense to me why you
I'm
do
sorry,
that,
if I borrow,
other than
the reason
to try
is,
to artificially stimulate the economy and
if I
help Joe
borrow
Biden
at
get reelected.
4%, if I borrow at 4.5%, I'm locking in that cost over 10 years.
Yeah, but you just
if
said
I
you weren't
borrow
trying
at
to time the market.
Well,
You are trying to time the market.
it isn't trying to time the market, because this is something that is a regular part of our policy. When short-term rates are high, and long-term rates are lower, the reason for that is that market participants expect short rates to go down, and they expect them to decline over 10 years to substantially under 4.5%. So even if we pay more this year than it would cost to borrow at a 10-year rate of 4.5%, the expected cost over the 10-year life of that borrowing can be the same or less than it would be if we issued a 10-year note. Now, we're not trying to time the market. We have a policy that we want to hold the issuance of short-term bills in line with recommendations of the Treasury Borrowing Advisory Committee.
Here's another twist. The Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates to fight inflation, but by borrowing short-term at high rates, the Treasury is actually pumping more money into the economy. Kennedy pointed this out. The Fed is trying to slow inflation while Treasury is doing the opposite. Are they working at cross purposes? Or is there a bigger strategy at play? Let me know what you think.
Can I say something now? Madam Secretary, I'm going to say it again. You're a lot smarter than me. But my mama didn't raise a fool. And if she did, it was one of my brothers. And what you're doing, you know it and I know it. And all those people sitting behind you know it. You're paying 5% to borrow money when you could pay 4% to borrow money. You announced you were going to do that back in November 2023. You're working cross purposes with Jay Powell.
We're not working.
And the reason you're doing this, is try to give the economy a sugar high 5 months before an election. Now, you know that, and I know that.
There's nothing about issuing short-term debt that creates a sugar
I'm out of
high
time.
for the
My chairman
economy.
says I'm out of time. It's good to see you.
At the end of the exchange, Kennedy summed it up with his classic style. My mama didn't raise a fool, and if she did, it was one of my brothers. This debate isn't just about interest rates, it's about how our government makes financial decisions that impact all of us. Should they lock in lower long-term rates, or is the short-term approach justified? Drop a comment below with your take. And if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into major political moments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.